quick talk about silver. Now, I know you've always been a massive advocate of silver, and you just keep showing me up a piece of silver. But
I can show you more.
Yeah.
I keep a lot of it right next to me. Just, sometimes I like to lay it all out on my bed and roll around in it.
Yeah, and then of course the 1,000-ounce bars require some proper strength to pick up. I noticed that it's all you can do to lift it up like that.
Those are well hidden.
Don't go to Dave's for it. They're in the vault somewhere. Yes. Talking about silver though, what percentage do you ever say to people, you already ought to have, when people come to you and say, well, how much silver should I buy as a percentage of, do you do that? I mean, what would you suggest to somebody? Silver.
I mean, the beauty about silver is that you can buy a lot more of it, buy a lot more ounces in terms of ounces of gold, right? And so, I mean, I think that encourages a lot of stackers to buy because, it just seems like you're getting more for your money because you get a lot more of it per dollar, right? But I mean, it's also, to me, silver, I mean, it's cheap outright and it's cheap relative to gold. So the gold silver ratio went from the high 90s in 1940 to 15 at the end of 1979. It's back at 81 now, right? The median from 1915 to now is around 40. So if you just go back to the median price since 1915 over that time period, that implies a price of 103 for silver. So in my mind, it's like, am I going to buy gold or am I going to buy silver? Well, I have some gold, but to me, silver looks like a much better value proposition.
A very good case for it there. I mean, that is a very good case because, as you say, just simply based upon, God's ratios. I mean, that is simply a fact. So it's only synthetic ratios that have made it so cheap, purely synthetic. And what, as the result of that there, Dave, is that massive supply shortages. It's been run on the basis of enormous amount of paper dilution just to keep it at those kind of levels that really help the cartel's making a ton of money out of this. I mean, we're talking about the 4 LPMCL members, the 4 banks. And the thing is, even though these guys are long for their own book, they're still gaming. They're still finding very profitable to short sell silver. But I think we just talked about Shanghai, and we talked about gold controlling the gold market. Now, all of a sudden, and I don't think it was a coincidence that Trump's visit to China, or Trump's last assault on China, or threats at China, basically came, well, it just happened to coincide. I'm not connected to the two. It happened to coincide with the free fall that came. And it maybe was a coincidence. But essentially, there is, not only did China come out right after that, and we talked about rare earths and one thing and then put export controls on some things, including silver. And then the US immediately retaliated with similar controls. This has been going on by stealth for a long time. We know that there's been these kind of things going on for a long time. But it's out in the open now. So now you've got less supply coming into the market. You've got the inability to really plug. Bearing in mind, if you were shorting SLV, if you were this LPMCL, you were shorting out SLV, you relied on the status quo. You relied on, we can just about handle it. We make sure we deliver Nokia, Samsung, all these guys just on time. And as long as they get it, screw everyone else. We've got control. And so obviously they make sure that there's always enough to fulfill those large orders, which would become, if these guys didn't get it, they'd go out to the market and they'd literally buy enough to make sure their assembly lines never shut down, and that would be the end of the cartel. But the interesting thing is, that status quo was in a long time. Now the silver hub, the price-setting silver hub, is no longer in Loco London. and it's no longer in the CME, LBMA's grip. And they thought they could keep this game going. And now all of a sudden, you've got export controls from both sides. They're caught in a hell of a short squeeze here. I don't think this is history. To me, this is history in the making. And anyone that doesn't view silver, even at $50, as an unbelievable bargain is going to miss. They're going to kick themselves. Be a bit like Bitcoin when it was $1. You're going to wish you made the move. And this is, to me, at this point here, when we're talking, and it's only just happened 2 weeks ago that these things, or even a week ago, that these controls really kicked into play. Of course, there's going to be a massive short squeeze. So someone has to go and buy a lot of silver just when there's little silver. So this is, to me, this to me is a really hell of an opportunity.
If you've been following me for a while, you already know I've never been shy about my love for silver. And before anyone rolls their eyes and says, "Andrew, there he goes again, waving that bar around." Look, yes, I do have some right here. In fact, I have too much of it within arm's reach at any given time. I've been accused of keeping more silver on my desk than most vaults keep on a shelf. Guilty as charged. I mean, why wouldn't I? There's something about the weight, the honesty of it. Sometimes, after a long trading day, I do what all normal people do. I lay it all out on the bed, roll in it like Scrooge McDuck, and wonder why the rest of the world hasn't caught on yet. But jokes aside, silver isn't just my hobby. It's not a fetish. And it's definitely not some fringe doomer prepper obsession. What I see, and what I've been trying to get viewers to understand for over a decade, is that silver is an opportunity hiding in plain sight. It's the one asset class that has been suppressed, undervalued, abused, but never defeated. It has withstood every synthetic trick the bullion banks have thrown at it. And yet, here we are, staring at a price that still doesn't reflect the underlying fundamentals, the industrial demand, the geopolitical shifts, or the sheer fragility of the paper system underpinning it. I get so many emails from people saying, "Andrew, how much silver should I own? What percentage of my portfolio should it be?" And I always give the same answer, not because I'm avoiding the question, but because everyone's circumstances are different. I'm not your financial advisor. I'm a guy who's been inside this market for over 4 decades and is still amazed at how cheap silver is compared to everything happening behind the scenes. What I can say, though, is this. Silver allows you to accumulate ounces, real money, real weight, for prices that still make sense to the average saver. Try buying an ounce of gold and an ounce of silver side by side at spot. Your brain will instinctively assume the silver is cheaper. And psychologically, that encourages stacking. It gives ordinary people access to real, tangible wealth. But let's take a step back from emotions and look at the numbers. The gold-silver ratio today is hovering around 81. Let that sink in. 81 ounces of silver for 1 ounce of gold. Historically, that's absurd. The median ratio going all the way back to 1915, over a century of data, is around 40. If all silver did was revert to that median, you're looking at silver north of $100. Roughly $103 based on today's gold price. And I always tell people, forget all the conspiracy theories, forget all the manipulation arguments. That simple mathematical reversion alone is enough to justify a strong silver position. But of course, we're not dealing with a fair fight. For years, the LBMA bullion banks, and we don't have to name names, you already know the lineup, have been artificially suppressing silver prices through paper dilution. You've got the same 4 major LPMCL banks pumping out synthetic silver at quantities that would make Samuel Colt blush. They've been flooding the market with unallocated, non-deliverable silver ounces that exist purely to cap price. And yet, here's the irony, they've been long for their own books most of the time. That's how profitable the scam has been. They can be net long physically and still short the paper into oblivion because the system allowed it. This is the part people outside the market often misunderstand. The banks themselves do not hate silver. They love silver, just not at a free market price. Their model worked as long as they could rely on two things. One, a stable flow of physical metal from refineries and recyclers to meet industrial demand. And two, a predictable level of complacency among investors. As long as the Nokias, the Samsungs, the Teslas of the world got their metal on time, they wouldn't upend the market. Because the day a major tech manufacturer wakes up and says, "We're not receiving our contracted silver, so we're going into the open market to buy everything available," that's the day the game ends. Now, fast forward to today. That entire framework is cracking, hard, visibly, and without any hope of repair. And I want viewers to understand this clearly. This isn't hyperbole. This isn't me banging the drum for entertainment value. We are living in a moment that will be written about in future financial textbooks, assuming they still exist and aren't sold as NFTs. The price-setting mechanism for silver is no longer headquartered in London. It's no longer under the LBMA's neat little umbrella. It's not even controlled by CME algorithms. That era is over. The real center of gravity has shifted east. Shanghai is now the gravitational anchor for price discovery. And this didn't happen overnight. It has been happening slowly, silently, and with tremendous strategic intent. You don't spend a decade accumulating gold, building state-backed exchanges, creating parallel settlement systems, and forging bilateral trade agreements without planning for financial independence. China's influence over precious metals markets is no longer subtle, it's overt. And the timing is interesting, because if you look at the geopolitical theater, this shift became publicly visible right around the time the US ramped up its rhetoric against China. I'm not suggesting anything conspiratorial here, but isn't it curious that Trump's last round of aggressive posturing toward China coincided almost exactly with a dramatic free fall in precious metals that frankly made no fundamental sense? Almost as if someone was trying to send a message. We still control the levers, but those levers don't work the way they used to. And China responded almost immediately, not with words, but with actions, export controls. Now, most Western media didn't pay much attention to this because they're too busy tracking whatever Elon Musk tweeted about AI chips. But anyone in the metal space knows that when China imposes export controls on rare earths, gallium, germanium, and yes, silver, you pay attention. And guess what happened next? The US slapped on its own set of controls. That's not coincidence. That is two major powers openly weaponizing supply chains that used to operate quietly, smoothly, and in everyone's collective interest. And for silver, this is the moment everything changed. For decades, the LBMA cartel was able to maintain this just-in-time flow of metal to industrial buyers. The system relied on predictability. They knew how much silver Samsung needed on a Tuesday. They knew how much solar manufacturers in Germany needed next quarter. They knew how much junk silver would come back through recycling. And as long as those pipelines kept moving, they could happily lean on the paper markets, sell synthetic ounces, suppress prices, and refill their coffers with real metal behind the scenes. But the export controls? They blew a hole straight through that model. Suddenly, the inflows became constrained. Suddenly, replenishing physical stockpiles wasn't guaranteed. You don't plug these holes with money. You plug them with metal. And metal is the one thing they do not have in infinite supply.